$500 billion sits in your account right now. You have 7 days to spend every single cent of it in Tokyo, or you die. Not metaphorically, actually die. Those are the rules of a game you didn't ask to play, delivered by a lawyer in a grey suit who appeared at your apartment door this morning with a contract that somehow already had your signature on it. You're reading the terms on page 3 when the implications hit you like a subway train. Spend it all, keep breathing, fail by even $1, and your life ends at midnight on day 7. No extensions, no negotiations. The lawyer adjusts his glasses and tells you the money is already transferred. He hands you a black card with no name on it, just numbers that seem to shimmer when you tilt it toward the light. Then he's gone, and you're standing in your studio apartment in Nakano, holding 500 billion reasons to get on a plane immediately. Tokyo makes sense for this, you think, as you book the first flight to Narita. It's the most expensive city on Earth when you need it to be. Land in Ginza costs $68,000 per square meter. A single meal at the right restaurant will run you $2,000 before you've touched the wine list. This is doable. This has to be doable. Except the math starts working against you the moment you land. 500 billion divided by 7 days is 71 billion per day. Per day. That's roughly $3 billion per hour if you never sleep. Which you won't, because sleeping means not spending, and not spending means dying. Your first move is real estate, because nothing burns money faster than Tokyo property. The most expensive residential land sits in Akasaka, Minato ward at 7 million yen per square meter. You buy a full city block, then another. Then you start acquiring buildings in Ginza, where the Yamano music site just sold for 67 million yen per square meter. You purchase it. You purchase the buildings around it. You buy an entire floor of the Aman residences in Azabudai Hills, the same complex where that Zozo billionaire dropped 225 million on a single unit. By hour 6, you've spent $8 billion on property alone, and it's not even close to enough. The scale of what you're attempting becomes clear when you do the math on your phone, while a realtor is explaining ownership transfer documents you're not listening to. At this rate, buying every luxury property in Tokyo wouldn't scratch the surface. You need to think bigger. You charter a helicopter to Ginza because ground transportation wastes time you've converted into a currency more valuable than the yen. The Ginza 6 complex rises ahead of you, and you land on a nearby rooftop with authorization that costs $50,000 to arrange in under 10 minutes. Money talks, insane money screams. Inside Ginza Mitsukoshi, you approach the Chanel counter and tell them you want everything. Not a shopping spree. Everything. Every bag, every piece of jewelry, every item in their Japan-exclusive collection. The staff looks at you like you've had a stroke until you put the black card on the counter and repeat yourself in Japanese you learned on the flight over. Within 20 minutes, 3 managers are involved, and within an hour, you've cleared out Chanel's entire Tokyo inventory for $11 million. You do this at Hermès, at Cartier, at Louis Vuitton, at Dior. You move through Ginza like a financial hurricane, and by the time the sun sets on day 1, you've spent $94 billion. You're behind schedule. Day 2 starts at Sukiyabashi Jiro, where you book the entire restaurant for a month straight. Not just a meal, every seating, every day for 30 consecutive days. You'll never eat most of it, but that's not the point. The point is the $2 million it costs to make Jiro's calendar disappear. Then you move to Ginza Kitafuku and do the same thing. Their crab-centric tasting menu runs $2,100 per person, and you book every seat for 90 days. You hit every 3-star Michelin restaurant in Tokyo with the same strategy. Kohaku, L'Effervescence, every kaiseki temple and sushi counter that's ever rejected a reservation. But food isn't expensive enough. Even at $2,000 per meal, even booking every top restaurant in the city for months, you're spending maybe $500 million. You need to move faster. The art market becomes your next target. You contact Sotheby's Tokyo office and tell them you want to acquire their entire upcoming auction. Not bid, acquire before the auction happens. They connect you with private collectors and you start buying. A Yoshitomo Nara piece for $30 million. A Yayoi Kusama infinity room installation for $80 million. You track down a private collector who owns an original Hokusai Great Wave print and offer him $10 million for something worth $3 million. He takes it. You buy another for $15 million just to keep momentum. You commission 50 new works from living artists at $1 million each. You purchase entire gallery inventories. You buy art you'll never see delivered to addresses you don't own. By the end of day 2, you've moved another $78 billion and your hands are shaking from exhaustion you can't afford to acknowledge. Day 3 is transportation. You buy a fleet of Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, a collection of vintage Japanese sports cars that costs $18 million at auction. You purchase a yacht you'll dock in Tokyo Bay for 1 week before you're presumably dead. You charter helicopters for routes you'll never fly and book private Shinkansen cars for trips you'll never take. You buy a helicopter, then another. You arrange for a private jet to circle Mount Fuji for 72 hours straight at a cost of $4 million because the burn rate matters more than the destination. But even burning money on transportation, you're only moving billions per day when you need to move tens of billions. The calculator on your phone shows a number that's getting worse, not better. You've spent $250 billion in 3 days, halfway through the timeline with less than half the money gone. The math isn't working. That's when you realize something that makes your stomach drop. There might not be enough things to buy in Tokyo. Not at the speed you need to buy them. You pivot to real estate and the numbers finally start moving the way they need to. You contact every major property developer in Tokyo. Mori Building, Mitsubishi Estate, Sumitomo Realty. You're not interested in viewing properties or negotiating terms. You're interested in buying entire buildings before they're finished being built. The Azabudai Hills Ammon Residences, where Yusaku Maezawa dropped $225 million on a single unit, you buy 12 of them. Sight unseen. No inspection. $3 billion moves in one phone call. You target Minato Ward, where residential land sells for 7 million yen per square meter. You buy an entire city block in Roppongi. The sellers think you're insane. You don't correct them because insanity and urgency look identical when you're writing checks with this many zeros. In Akasaka, you purchase a penthouse that hasn't been built yet for $400 million. You buy the penthouse above it for the same price just to maintain pace. Your lawyer calls and says the paperwork can't possibly be processed this quickly. You tell him to hire 50 more lawyers and bill you $1 million per day until it's done. He stops asking questions. By the end of day 4, you've spent another $96 billion on properties you'll never occupy in a city you'll be dead in before the deeds are transferred. The math is getting closer, but it's still not enough. You're $346 billion in with 72 hours remaining. Day 5 is when things get desperate. You buy naming rights to stadiums you'll never attend. The Tokyo Dome becomes yours for $800 million. You purchase advertising space on every available surface in Shibuya for the next decade. Billboards that will display nothing because you haven't created ads, you've just removed the space from the market. $2 billion to make Shibuya slightly quieter. You commission public art installations across the city at $10 million per piece and order 500 of them. Sculptures that will never be made by artists who can't believe the contracts they're signing. You endow university chairs, 20 of them, $50 million each. The University of Tokyo suddenly has more funded research positions than they have researchers. You donate to every museum in the metropolitan area with instructions to build new wings they don't need and haven't planned for. The National Museum gets $500 million. The Mori Art Museum gets $300 million. You're not a philanthropist. You're a man drowning in money with 60 hours left to breathe. Infrastructure becomes your next attack vector. You fund the expansion of subway lines that haven't been proposed yet. $8 billion to Tokyo Metro with a single instruction. Start digging. You don't care where. You finance the construction of a bridge that connects nothing to nothing at a cost of $12 billion because the engineering firm you contacted said it was technically possible and you said, make it happen. But here's what nobody tells you about spending money at this scale. The economy starts to notice. By day 6, the yen is fluctuating. Your purchases are moving markets. Currency traders in Singapore and London are trying to understand why Tokyo real estate futures are spiking. The Bank of Japan releases a statement about monitoring unusual capital flows. You've become a systemic risk to monetary policy, and you still have $112 billion left with 36 hours on the clock. You're in your hotel room at 3 in the morning and your hands won't stop shaking. Not from fear, from exhaustion that's gone past physical into something neurological. You've been awake for 130 hours, you're drinking coffee that tastes like battery acid and staring at spreadsheets that have stopped making sense. The number is still too high. You're going to die because Tokyo isn't expensive enough. That's when your lawyer calls with an idea so absurd you know immediately it's the only option left. Derivatives. You can't spend the money fast enough on physical goods, but you can spend it on the promise of future goods. Financial instruments that represent value without requiring delivery. You contact every major bank in Tokyo and start buying options. Futures contracts on commodities you'll never take possession of. Currency swaps in denominations that make the traders pause before entering the numbers. You purchase insurance policies on assets you don't own against events that will never happen. 10 billion in credit default swaps, 15 billion in interest rate derivatives, structured so poorly that the risk management departments flag them immediately, and your lawyers have to confirm, yes, he actually wants to buy these. You're not investing. You're setting money on fire in the most technically legal way possible. The financial instruments are processed electronically, which means the money moves at the speed of fiber optic cable instead of the speed of construction permits. $20 billion disappears in 6 minutes, then 30 billion, then 40. You're buying synthetic exposure to markets that don't exist for reasons nobody can explain, and the banks are happy to sell because your money spends the same as anyone else's, even if your strategy looks like a suicide note written in Bloomberg terminal commands. Day 7, 6 hours left. You've spent $473 billion. 27 billion remains. You're so close the number feels like it's mocking you. You buy more derivatives, more options. You purchase the rights to purchase the rights to purchase something that hasn't been invented yet. You buy and sell the same block of Ginza real estate back and forth to yourself at escalating prices until the transaction fees alone eat $8 billion. 3 hours left. 11 billion remains. You're standing in your hotel room and the sun is rising over Tokyo for the last time you'll ever see it. The city looks beautiful and completely indifferent to the fact that you're about to die inside it. You buy one final round of options contracts, $7 billion on oil futures you'll never collect. The number drops to 4 billion. 2 hours left. You buy every available hotel room in Tokyo for the next month and leave them empty. 1 billion. You commission a private symphony performance that will play for an audience of 0. 500 million. You're scraping now. Buying things that cost millions when you need to spend billions. The math has betrayed you. 1 hour left. $3.2 billion remaining. You sit on the floor of your hotel room with your laptop and your phone and the calculator that's been lying to you all week. The auction house contacts you with the terms. They'll take your body when you're done. Harvest everything sellable. Organs, tissue, corneas. The medical market will recoup approximately $40 million. It won't cover what you've spent. It won't even cover the interest on what you've spent. But it's procedure. You close your eyes. The clock runs out. You didn't make it, and Tokyo just keeps moving. The medical team arrives at dawn. 2 doctors, 3 nurses, a harvesting coordinator. They're efficient because this isn't their first extraction, and Tokyo processes failure with the same clinical precision it processes everything else. They prep you in the hotel room because transporting a living donor to a facility adds complications the auction house doesn't want to deal with. The paperwork is already filed. Your organs have been pre-sold to recipients whose names you'll never know. A 52-year-old businessman gets your liver. A 31-year-old mother of 2 gets your kidneys. Your corneas go to a teenager in Yokohama. Your heart is worth the most. $14 million to a private hospital in Osaka, where a former parliament member has been waiting on a list. He jumped by paying enough money to build a school. They ask if you want anesthesia. You say yes. Not because you're afraid of pain, but because watching them disassemble you while conscious seems like the kind of psychological damage that transcends the physical act. The anesthesiologist is a woman in her 40s who's done this 60 times. She doesn't make small talk. She checks your veins, finds one that works, and slides the IV in with the practiced neutrality of someone who stopped thinking about the ethics of her job sometime around case 12. You're lying on the hotel bed that cost $18,000 a night for 6 nights. The sheets are Egyptian cotton. The view through the window shows Tokyo waking up, salarymen flooding into train stations, convenience stores opening, delivery trucks double parked on narrow streets, 14 million people starting another day in a city that never acknowledged you were here. The drug hits your bloodstream and the room softens. The lead surgeon says something in Japanese. You've spent 7 days in this country and learned maybe 40 words. None of them are useful now. Your Japanese vocabulary includes thank you, excuse me, where is the bathroom, and I would like to buy that building. You never learned the word for goodbye. The coordinator from the auction house is in the corner with a tablet. She's tracking the organ distribution in real time, logging serial numbers, confirming transport teams. Your body is being divided into components before you're even unconscious. She's probably 26, college educated, speaks 3 languages, got recruited into corpse logistics because the pay is good and Tokyo's mortality rate creates job security. She'll go home tonight and eat dinner with her boyfriend and not think about you at all because thinking about the product makes the job impossible. You wonder if your mother will find out how this ended. Probably not. The auction house doesn't notify next of kin. You're processed as an anonymous donor. Your organs get transplanted into people who'll never know your name or the fact that you died trying to spend more money in a week than most humans see in a lifetime. The businessman with your liver will live another 15 years. The mother with your kidneys will watch her daughters graduate college. The parliament member with your heart will give a speech about healthcare reform without a trace of irony. The anesthesia pulls you under. Your last conscious thought is that you failed by $3.2 billion. The number feels enormous and completely meaningless at the same time. $3.2 billion is more money than exists in the entire economy of some countries. It's also just a number on a screen that nobody will remember by next week. The surgeons work for 11 hours. They're good at their jobs. They extract everything viable. Liver, kidneys, heart, lungs, pancreas, corneas, skin grafts, bone marrow, sections of intestine that can be used for research. The human body is worth more in pieces than it ever was whole. Your organs gross $43 million. The auction house takes a 30% commission, $12.9 million. The remaining $30.1 million goes toward your debt. You spent $496.8 billion in 7 days. The organ sales recoup $30.1 million. That leaves $496.77 billion in outstanding debt. The auction house sells the debt to a financial recovery firm that specializes in impossible collections. The firm will spend the next decade pursuing your estate, which doesn't exist, and your family, who never agreed to anything. They'll recover nothing. The debt will eventually be written off as a loss and absorbed into the firm's operating costs, which will be passed on to other clients, which means your failure gets distributed across the entire financial system in increments so small nobody notices. Tokyo continues. The buildings you bought get resold. The art you purchased enters private collections. The derivatives you traded expire worthless, exactly as designed. The restaurants you booked stay empty for one night and then fill with other reservations. The hotel room gets cleaned. The sheets get changed. A new guest checks in by Thursday. The Ginza real estate you flipped back and forth to yourself gets audited by the tax authority. They determine the transactions were legal but economically incoherent. They file a report. The report gets stored in a database. Nobody reads it. The woman at the auction house moves on to her next case. A man in Saitama who wants to donate his body to a medical school. Standard procedure, significantly less paperwork. Your mother never finds out what happened. She thinks you're still in Tokyo teaching English or working an office job or doing whatever vague thing you told her you were doing when you stopped calling 3 months ago. She'll try your number eventually. It'll be disconnected. She'll worry. She'll ask relatives if they've heard from you. Nobody has. She'll file a missing person report with local police who have no jurisdiction in Japan. The report will go nowhere. After 2 years, she'll hold a funeral with an empty casket. 60 people will attend. They'll say you were too young. They'll wonder what happened. Nobody will ever know. The businessman with your liver lives to 67. He dies of a stroke unrelated to the transplant. The mother with your kidneys sees both daughters married. The parliament member with your heart serves 2 more terms and retires to Hokkaido. The teenager with your corneas becomes a photographer. None of them know they're carrying pieces of someone who tried to burn through $500 billion in a week and came up short. Tokyo's population is 14 million. 14 million people living in stacked rooms and riding packed trains and eating convenience store rice balls and building lives out of whatever materials they can gather. You were here for 7 days. You spent enough money to fund a small country. You bought buildings and art and experiences and financial instruments that dissolved the moment you touched them. You moved through this city like a meteor and the city didn't even look up. $3.2 billion. That's what you couldn't spend. That's the gap between ambition and reality. The number that killed you wasn't the $496.8 billion you managed to burn. It was the $3.2 billion that remained. Close doesn't count. Second place is first loser. The margin of error is 0. The auction house closes your file on a Wednesday. Case number 447. Total recovery 30.1 million. Net loss 496.77 billion. Status resolved. The coordinator who watched you go under saves the file to the server and opens the next one. Tokyo keeps moving. Your story ends. Nobody writes it down. The auction house closes your file on a Wednesday. Case number 447. Total recovery 30.1 million. Net loss 496.77 billion. Status resolved. The coordinator who watched you go under saves the file to the server and opens the next one. Somewhere in Ginza, the building you bought for $3 billion gets a new tenant. The penthouse in Roppongi that you purchased sight unseen for $400 million goes on the market at $500 million. Someone will buy it. Someone always buys. The Tokyo Dome hosts a baseball game under a name you paid $800 million to own for 10 years. The announcer says the name. 50,000 people hear it. Not one of them knows it used to be yours. The derivatives expire. The futures contracts settle. The currency swaps unwind. The financial instruments you bought in a panic at 3 in the morning on day 6 dissolve back into the digital ether they came from. The banks mark them as closed positions. The traders who sold them to you get their bonuses. Everyone profits except the person who needed to spend $500 billion in 7 days and came up $3.2 billion short. Your mother stops calling your number after 6 months. Your apartment in Nakano gets cleared out by the landlord when the rent goes unpaid. Your belongings fit in 4 boxes. The landlord donates them to a second-hand shop in Koenji. Someone buys your coffee maker for 800 yen. Your books sell for 50 yen each. The laptop you use to track your spending goes for 12,000 yen to a college student who'll never know it was used to orchestrate the fastest financial suicide in Tokyo's history. The black card with no name gets deactivated. The numbers that shimmered when you tilted it toward the light stop shimmering. It's just plastic now. The bank destroys it according to protocol, cuts it into 6 pieces, incinerates the pieces. The ashes get mixed with other ashes in a processing facility in Chiba. Your access to $500 billion becomes smoke on a Tuesday afternoon while someone's eating lunch. Tokyo is 14 million people who will never know you existed. You were here for 7 days. You spent enough money to rebuild entire neighborhoods. You moved billions of dollars through an economy that processes trillions. You made markets fluctuate. You triggered Bank of Japan statements. You became a systemic risk. And when you failed, when they harvested your organs in a hotel room overlooking a city that never stopped moving, Tokyo didn't pause. Not for a second. The businessman with your liver eats dinner with his family. The mother with your kidneys helps her daughter with homework. The parliament member with your heart gives a speech about fiscal responsibility. The teenager with your corneas takes a photograph of Shibuya at night. They're all alive because you're not. They'll never meet. They'll never know they're connected. They're walking around Tokyo right now carrying pieces of someone who learned the hardest lesson the city teaches. You can't buy your way into mattering here. The math doesn't work. The city's too big. The money's never enough. The clock runs out. And Tokyo just keeps moving. Tokyo just keeps moving. Tokyo just keeps moving. Tokyo